Okay, week 6, chapter 12, or week 12, chapter 12. This chapter is called Morality, Religion, and Justice, but not a whole lot of, oh, that's a motorcycle, okay. And there's somebody about to jump in the water, it looks like. Okay, there's a motorcycle. It must be this guy's motorcycle. Anyway, okay, so it's not really that much about religion. Okay, this is really kind of a fascinating chapter. Ethnocentrism leads people to assume that our own culture's ways are better or more natural than that of others. Ethnocentrism allowed Europeans to force their understanding of morality, religion, and justice on all the indigenous people they came across, all in the name of their definition of civilization. And this is one of the things that you need to think about. One of the reasons, and of course, the other thing about ethnocentrism is if we can't argue that the most of the Europeans, if not all the Europeans, were fairly ethnocentric, thinking that they were bringing civilization to native lands. I mean, if you watch old Tarzan movies, you see exactly the same thing. Any time Europeans went anywhere, they were trying to force their own ideas on another group of people. But of course, the other part is that, and this isn't a criticism, but the other part is that if you look at American Indian tribes, just about every tribe calls themselves the people or the human beings. Well, that's from an old movie. The Numina, the Comanche. Numina means the people. The Nimepu, we the people. Who else? Almost all the tribes call themselves the people, including the Dene people, which means children of the holy people. So we can complain about the Europeans all we want, and that is very very much true. Europeans are extremely ethnocentric, but the tribes that were certainly in North America that we deal with or that we have that we look at, they feel the same way. Actually, they're they tend to be relatively ethnocentric. And the other question I guess we have to ask ourselves is, are all people ethnocentric? I mean, all these individuals that have wandered around the world and forced themselves on other groups, did were they arrogant enough to think that they were superior to the other people, and that's why they did it? That they deserved whatever resources were in that area, and the other people didn't. That's another. It made you ethnocentrism may be human, and that may be something that we need to combat as humans. Is ethnocentrism. In 1971, Lawrence Kohlberg developed his stages of moral development. The first stage, level one, was the pre-conventional stage. Level two, the conventional stage, and level three, the post-conventional stage. And this is, of course, a picture of Lawrence Kohlberg. As you can see, he hadn't combed his hair that day. The pre-conventional moral reasoning suggests that people interpret morality based on a calculation of how much better or worse off they would be for acting in a certain way. Morality at this level is about trying to behave in a way that provides the best overall return. Pre-conventional morality. Level 1. Level 2, conventional moral reasoning, is about viewing actions as moral to the extent that they help maintain and facilitate the social order. This level dictates that morality is about following the rules, and individuals should not question where those rules come from. Post-conventional moral reasoning is based on the consideration of abstract ethical principles of what is right and wrong. and the moral decisions are reached based on the logical extensions of those principles. Good behavior is seen as that which is consistent with a set of universal ethical principles that emphasize justice and individual rights. So is Kohlberg's morality universal? That's the basic question. Snary in 1985 did a meta-analysis of 27 cultural areas from around the world that had been tested using Kohlberg's parameters. There was some universality in moral reasoning. In all cultures, there were some adults who reasoned at the conventional levels, and in no cultural groups did the average adult reason at the pre-conventional level, whatever I can get from this. Evidence of post-conventional moral reasoning was not universally found. Moral reasoning based on justice and individual rights. Every urban Western sample contained at least some individuals who showed reasoning based on justice and individual rights. Not a single person from the traditional tribal and village folk populations showed such reasoning. Yeah, I guess you'd have to have a universal idea of justice and individual rights for that to be true. One reason for the discrepancy between traditional societies and more urbane Western societies may be because of the educational experiences of both societies. Traditional educational practices may not include the same ideas of justice and individual rights. Another explanation for the discrepancies between traditional and Western cultures is that the two types of cultures live in different environments. Because of the harsher environment, tribal and village populations have more concerns than justice and individual rights, like survival. So the closer they are to survival, the less likely that justice and individual rights will be important to them. Schrader and colleagues in 1977 argued that Kohlberg's model of moral reasoning only represented one of the three codes that people use for moral judgments around the world: the ethics of autonomy, the ethics of community, and the ethics of divinity. Schrader and his group referred to Kohlberg's model as an ethic of autonomy. The ethic views morality in terms of individual freedom and rights violations. An act is seen as immoral under the ethic of autonomy when it directly hurts another person or infringes on others' rights and freedoms as an individual. A second code of ethics that Schrader and colleagues proposes is an ethic of community, which emphasizes that individuals have duties that conform with their roles in a community or a social hierarchy. According to this code, there is an ethical principle to uphold one's interpersonal duties and obligations toward others. Actions are seen as wrong when individuals fail to perform their duties. And a good example of this would be taking care of your children. That is an action that is the community may see as negative if you don't take care of your own children, if they have to take care of your children for you. So if you fail to do that, of course, then you would be going against the second code of ethics. The third code of Schrader and colleagues suggested was an ethic of divinity, which is concerned with sanctity and the perceived natural order of things. This code contains the ethical principle that one is obligated to preserve the standards mandated by a transcendent authority. Actions are seen as immoral if they cause impurity or degradation to oneself or others, or if one shows any disrespect for God or God's creations. I got the hiccups. German sociologist Ferdinand Tönnies argued that there are two ways that people can relate to each other in a group. Gemeinschaft, community relationships bind people together with a social glue of concord, and Gesellschaft, people act as individuals and have weak binds with society. Gemeinschaft groups are characteristic of small folk group organizations, and within these groups, interpersonal relationships play an especially important role. People feel connected to one another because they feel a unity of spirit. The relationships are central to an individual's identity. Obligations associated with one's Gemeinschaft carry weight of full moral obligations. Gesellschaft are groups that are characteristic of modern Western societies and treat relationships as imaginary, instrumental, as means to an end. Gesellschaft groups are perceived as relatively impersonal and somewhat contractual, which leads to the necessity of justice obligations to govern disputes between individuals. In Gesellschaft groups, individuals can't be expected always to behave in pro-social ways toward others because they have strong obligations toward them, so formalized rules are necessary to keep people in line, such as laws. People the world over feel a moral obligation to their community. Objective obligations, people believe that they have an obligation to act in a certain way, even if there is no official rule or law that requires them to do so. Legitimately regulated, people should be prevented from engaging in a moral violation or should be punished if they act in such a way. Ethic of divinity involves a moral code respecting the sanctity of the natural order of things as dictated by a transcendent moral authority. Immoral actions are perceived to violate the natural order of things. Hunter in 1991 proposed that a culture war exists in the United States and that the battle lines are drawn between those who have an impulse toward orthodoxy and those who have an impulse toward progressivism. And of course, we would call that liberalism and conservatism in the United States. And of course, this is a cartoon from The Simpsons. One is calling the other one a pinko. Pinko has to do with calling somebody a communist. Pinko, they're reds, but if you're pink, you're a socialist, I guess. And the other one's calling the other person a fascist or a Nazi. This one's conservative and this one's liberal. Religious adherents who are orthodox are committed to the idea of a transcendent authority. This authority was viewed to have existed long before the humans and is operating independently of people. This authority is believed to be more knowledgeable and more powerful than all of human experience. In the Orthodox view, this transcendent authority created a moral code and revealed it to human beings in sacred texts. The moral code is perceived to stand across all times and circumstances and should not be altered to accommodate any social changes or individual differences. Individuals in society are expected to adapt themselves to this ordained moral code. And of course, we're arguing about this right now. This has to do with the Supreme Court, as if the Constitution is something that's unchangeable and has to be adhered to directly, despite the fact that it was written over 200 years ago. People who are orthodox about the Bible, of course, feel the same. There are some people that are so orthodox that they believe that that every word in the Bible was written by God, whether it was written by Jesus or not, doesn't really matter. It was the idea that this is such a holy writing that you can't argue with anything that's in the Bible, and that's the way they feel. Other individuals, of course, are not as are not orthodox, so they have different ideas. Adherents of progressive religions emphasize the importance of human agency in understanding and formulating a moral code. Progressivists reject the idea of a transcendent authority reveals itself and its will to humans. They believe that humans play an integral role in the formulation of moral codes. Progressivists believe that because social circumstances change, the moral code must change along with them, like hip hop and religion. In 2007, Haidt and Graham expanded Schrader's 3 moral ethics by expanding it to 5. Haidt is the guy on the left, and Graham is the guy on the right. The 5 are avoid harm, protect fairness, Be loyal to your in-group, respect hierarchy, and achieve purity. Avoid harm. People are sensitive to any behaviors that cause harm to others. Protect fairness. They attend closely to whether resources or rights are distributed in a fair way. Loyalty to their in-groups. People are motivated to identify with their in-groups, make sacrifices for their in-groups, and trust in-group members more than they trust out-group members. Respect hierarchy. People tend to respect hierarchy by admiring their superiors and believing subordinates need to act in accordance with the wishes of authority figures. And the last is achieve purity. Reflecting the ethic of divinity, people are motivated to achieve purity and are disgusted at behaviors ruled by the carnal passions, such as lust or gluttony, or by behaviors that suggest contamination of any kind. We are seeking to achieve purity. There is a greater emphasis on faith in Christianity, especially Protestantism, than in Judaism. Membership in Judaism is defined by descent. Traditionally, one becomes Jewish by being born to a Jewish biological mother. While Christianity is based on beliefs, traditional Judaism emphasizes particular practices such as keeping kosher by avoiding certain foods like pork. So while one has a belief system, the other has a practice system. In other words, if you practice being a Jewish person, whatever your beliefs are not as important as the fact that you're doing what you've been told to do. Christianity, on the other hand, has to do with belief over practice. And of course, you can see this. People complain about this all the time, that somebody goes to church and the rest of the days of the week, they go to church on Sunday, and that's the day that they practice, or that they practice their religion. But it's the belief system that's more important than the practice, because the rest of the time they do very unchristian things. Protestant sect membership is primarily defined by beliefs. One cannot become a member of a church until one publicly accepts the Christian faith as dictated by a specific church and is thus baptized into that church. Christianity has fewer practices and instead places more emphasis on one's private communications with God. Reflecting the differential emphasis on practices and beliefs, a survey asked Jewish and Protestant participants how important practices and beliefs were for being religious. The results reveal that Jewish participants rated practices as more important than beliefs for being religious, whereas Protestants put greater emphasis on beliefs than practices. I need to take a drink, just a second. Jewish and Protestant participants were asked to evaluate a story of a married man contemplating having an affair with a woman in his office. All participants viewed extramarital liaisons as sinful as having an affair. Wait a minute. I misread that, didn't I? All participants viewed extramarital liaisons as immoral, but the Protestants saw thinking about having an affair as sinful as having an affair. So thinking about it was just as bad as doing it. The Jewish participants limit their moral domain to what people do and not what they think. A good example would be, and of course you guys don't remember this because you weren't around in 1976, but Jimmy Carter was running for president, and he had an interview that was in Playboy magazine, as weird as that may seem. Of course, Playboy doesn't really mean that much to you anymore, but Playboy used to be the quintessential skin magazine in the United States. Anyway, Jimmy Carter had an interview, and in it he said he sinned in his heart. And when he said that, but he asked for forgiveness for sinning in his heart. Now, of course, what he meant was he had never had an affair with anybody, but he thought about having affairs. And of course, and he's a Christian, a very staunch Christian, and in his way of seeing things, thinking about having an affair is just as bad as having an affair. But if he had been Jewish, of course, it wouldn't be that way. It's what you do, not what you think. Distributing resources, you can distribute culture of fairness. Distributing resources, you can distribute resources by the principle of need, which dictates that resources are directed to those who need them the most. What were we talking about? Morality of thought. Okay. Distributing resources, principle of equality, dictates that resources should be shared equally among members of a group. So the principle of need is that the people that need it the most are the ones that should get it. The principle of equality is that everybody should get the same amount. Principle of equity states that resources are distributed based on an individual's contributions. The more an individual produces, the more resources they should receive. Just a social system that rewards individuals on the basis of equity principle is known as a meritocracy. And meritocracies tend to be more common in individualistic societies, like the United States. They can lead workers to be highly motivated to work hard because their earnings depend on their efforts. When one worker does well, others tend to do worse. Meritocratic systems tend to breed competition among their workers. Once upon a time, many, many years ago, back in the early 70s, I worked in a factory for a summer. I worked in a factory, and they would give me a job to do. And if I did really well, I was doing piecework. And if I did really well, then the union would come around and tell me to slow things down. Because if I did it too fast, then they would expect everybody to do it that fast. It was a meritocratic system, but it was being controlled by well, they didn't want me to do very well, actually, because they didn't want everybody to have to do so well. They were afraid that they were paying, okay, so what was happening, they were paying me 5 cents a part. So every time I made a part, I got 5 cents. So if I made 100 parts in an hour, well, that's not very much, is it? If I made 1,000 parts in an hour, I was making $50 an hour. Okay, so that's great. But the problem was, and this is the way this is the way the union explained it to me. If you make 1,000 parts in an hour, then what they will do is instead of paying you 5 cents a part, they'll start paying you 1 cent a part, or they'll start paying you, 3 cents a part. They'll just lower the rate. So what you're doing, if you're doing it really, really fast, is that you're going to force the company to lower the rate. That's what they were saying, and they were right, because and one of the reasons they put me on the machine was to see how many parts I could make, so that they could lower the rate. That's what they were telling me. And they did this with non-union people. They did it all the time. They would pay them to go in, and of course, it has to do with averages and whatnot as to how they paid you. And the company was just trying to mess up the union, and they were using me to do it. In some organizations, raises are distributed by longevity. This is known as a seniority system. Seniority systems follow the principle of equality because there is no competition between workers. Pay is determined using the same formula for everyone. And if you look at the college system, the academic system we have at Dene College, it's the same way. The longer you've been someplace, the higher your rank, and the higher your rank, the more money you make. So somebody that's just starting out is not making nearly as much. They maybe just have a master's degree instead of a PhD. Once you get your PhD, theoretically, it's supposed to be across the board, but that's not the way it works. It is often assumed that merit-based pay is the way to ensure the greatest amount of effort from one's employees. However, Japanese workers have traditionally been among the hardest working in the world. There tends to be a great deal of voluntary overtime, and many workers never take their vacations. And Japanese companies tend to have more seniority based pay than American organizations. They're even allowed to sleep at their desks. As a matter of fact, they're not just allowed to do that. It is suggested that they do that so that they can work longer hours. Social scientists have developed various economic games to measure people's sense of fairness. In the coin flip scenario, you are given $100 that has been given to you instead of another person by means of a coin flip. So there's two of you, and they do a coin flip, and one of you gets $100. The other one gets nothing. You can give the other person any portion of the $100, but they will never know which you are. Now, what I want you to do as you're listening to this lecture, I want you to imagine that you're the person that got the $100. Now, what would you do? You can give that other person some money, or you don't have to give them anything. What would you do? This is known as the dictator game, and there are various outcomes. According to economic theory, and this is the difference between social science and the business department. Strangely enough, we're in the same department, despite the fact that we do things one way and they do things and have ideas that are completely different from us. And this is something that I argue with Pat all the time, Patrick Blackwater. I argue with him all the time about ethics that are being taught in business. Are there any ethics? My goodness, if you look at some of the business practices, we just found out today that when Trump built the Trump Tower in New York City, he had a loan of $247 million that he defaulted on. And instead of going to jail or being forced to pay it, they just decided to write it off. And the reason they decided to write it off was because they knew that if they tried to get the money from him, he would start complaining and he would sue them and he would keep them in court for an extended length of time. And it was bad. Bad publicity having this guy whine all the time. So and he went to business school. He went to Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. And who teaches people this? That you don't have to pay you. Somebody gives you money, you don't have to pay it back. I mean, who teaches people that? Well, I guess that's what you learn in business school. Anyway, economic theory dictates that the rational person will give their invisible partner nothing because they will never know who you are and you don't stand to gain anything from them. So because you're not going to get anything and they don't know that they're screwed out of $50, then you shouldn't give them anything. That's what the business people say. So look at all those people in the business department and shake your finger at them because they don't think you deserve, or that they think that that's the way you should do things. Now, if you actually gave the person something, if when you were thinking about this, if you actually gave them something, guess what? Curiously, the economic theory almost never happens. Almost everybody gives somebody something. People around the world feel that keeping all the money for themselves is not right, and it just seems fair to give the other person some money. The most common decision that people make is a 50-50 split. So if you said you're going to give them $50 and you're going to keep $50, now remember, you didn't earn this money. You didn't do anything for this money. This is 50 free bucks. So why not? Why not give the other person something? $50. When economists found that even Western college students were making irrational decisions in the dictator game by giving away money that would not benefit them, they sought an explanation. This did not fit any economic models that they had developed. So, wait a minute, maybe the problem is that business schools are teaching the wrong thing. Maybe they're using economic theories that are that don't agree with people's morality. Maybe that's the problem. A surprise to everyone, people in the United States averaged the highest amount of money to the invisible partner in the dictator game, $47. Factors that dictated the concept of fairness included the amount of calories negotiated at market for food and being a member of a world religion such as Christianity or Islam, where God observes one's fairness. And that's the meaning of this picture. This guy's urinating in the ocean, and God's up there looking at him, going, "What the? What are you doing?" I just think that's a funny picture. Sorry. Another game is the public goods game. A group of four people are given $10 each. If the individuals donate all their money into a common pool, they are all rewarded with 1.6 times the pot, or $64, and each person gets $16. So we start out with $10, and if we keep putting all of our money in the pot, then we'll get $16 every time. So we're accumulating more and more money. So potentially everybody wins. This is a great game, and everybody keeps making more money. However, if one person holds their $10 out, the pot only ends up with $48, and they will each get $12. But the free rider now will get $22. So whereas you've got $22 now, they've got $32 now. And if they keep keeping out their $10 and you're just making $12 every time, they're making $22. They're making $10 more than you are. So they start out with 32. The next time they've got 54 and you've got 34. And the next time they've got 76 and you've got 46. So you can see they're making a lot more money. Now, is that smart or is that not smart? So what would you do? Would you hold out your money or would you keep putting $10 in, hoping that and wanting everybody else to break even? As the number of rounds increased, the researchers found that the group made less and less money because the temptation to be a free rider was just too great. Because of this, the researchers decided to add a new factor to the game. Okay, so this person got $76. The next time they do it, they've got $98. The next time they do it. And of course, the free riders. So if there are two free riders, now there's only $20 going into the pot. Now people are starting to lose money. And the free riders, of course, are making $22 each time. So if nobody puts anything into the pot, actually, nobody gets any money. So when we're talking about a free rider, what kind of a game is this anyway? So what are we going to do now? So we've got too many free riders in the game and nobody's making any money. So what's going to happen next? So now they decided to change the rules. A player could now pay $1 of their own money and have one of the free riders forfeit $3. The players seemed perfectly willing to pay their own money to get another player punished. The researchers found that with the punishment rule, cooperation increased quite dramatically and remained stable across time. So if you punished somebody, they were more likely to go, okay, I don't want to lose my $3. I will put my $10 in. The researchers proposed that a key factor that allowed human cooperation to evolve was people's willingness to engage in this kind of altruistic punishment. By feeling motivated to punish those who weren't cooperating, people were able to ensure that group members didn't free ride, which allowed humans to develop norms of cooperation and for large societies to flourish. Now you got to wonder how capitalism works and how it can work over time. Capitalism means that we're going to make a product and we're going to sell it for a certain amount of money, and we have to keep making more and more money. How do we do that? We make more product. If we make more product, we get more profit. But at the same time, how do I have enough money to support my business? Well, what I do is I sell stocks. I sell shares to the people. I sell shares to people, And but they have to continue to make money. If they're not making any money, they're not going to put any more money into your organization. Okay, so that's the way things are working, and that's why capitalism works. But eventually, of course, you're going to it's things are going to stop working that way because you can't just keep making more and more money unless you're charging more money, and then suddenly people aren't going to want to buy your product anymore. It's too expensive, and of course, we've seen that in the United States. So what do? We start buying product. We start buying products overseas from people that are selling it cheaper than we are, and so now our people aren't making. They're not making typewriters anymore. They're well, nobody has a typewriter anymore anyway. Apple makes their computers in China. So does HP. HP makes their. What computers are being made in the United States now? We used to have Dell. We used to have Gateway, but I don't think any computers are being made in the United States anymore. When the public goods game was played around the world, altruistic punishment was practiced. However, in addition to the tendency for altruistic punishment, in many societies, people showed strong tendencies for what researchers called antisocial punishment. Okay, so we have altruistic punishment where you're trying to get everybody in line. So, what in the world could antisocial punishment be? The researchers found that some people were willing to pay their own money to punish another player, even if that player was cooperating. And this is known as antisocial punishment. So just because the guy on your left, you don't like him so much, you're going to pay to have him punished, even though he's not doing anything wrong. The motivation for this antisocial punishment seemed to be largely a function of revenge, in which people would punish a player who had punished them on a previous round. But even if he didn't punish you on a previous round, you're still very likely to try to punish somebody so that you make money and they don't. Although this tendency for antisocial punishment was negligible in weird societies, white economic, that's Western societies. In other societies, this behavior predominated. So in Western societies like Canada, Europe, the United States, and Australia, it didn't happen very often. People weren't that antisocial. They didn't suffer from antisocial personality disorder. But in some places, antisocial personality disorder or being an antisocial punisher was fairly common. Antisocial punishment predominates in Oman more than any other country. Oman is a country that is just south of Saudi Arabia on the Arabian Peninsula. Antisocial punishment predominates in Greece as the second highest level measured. Antisocial punishment predominates in Saudi Arabia as the third highest level measured. Antisocial punishment predominates in Russia as the fourth highest level measured. So the Russians, the Saudi Arabians, the Greeks, and the Omanis are the people that do this antisocial punishment on a relatively regular basis. The notion that punishment promotes cooperation holds true only in societies characterized by norms for civic cooperation and high levels of trust. Antisocial punishment was entirely unexpected by researchers who first discovered it, but it appears to be quite commonplace in many cultures, and it remains somewhat puzzling. So how in the world can you have a society where everybody's punishing each other all the time? Where they have these antisocial ideas, where they're walking around thinking, well, how can I cheat this guy? What kind of societies are we talking about here? Saudi Arabia, Oman, Greece, and Russia. What kind of societies are we dealing with here? Well, let's see what we got. The researchers' data show that societies with weaker norms for civic cooperation and a weaker rule of law engaged in more antisocial punishment in public goods games. One of the things that we know about Greece is that Greece has had an their economy self-destructed about 5 years ago, well, about 6 years ago, I guess. So there was a lot of social unrest going on in Greece. Oman and Saudi Arabia are, of course, both Muslim countries. They are both controlled by a, um, a royal family, a monarchy. So there's so the idea of things being fair uh, isn't all that common. So what do we have in Russia? Well, Russia used to be the Soviet Union until 1989. Through the 1990s, the Soviet Union collapsed. And because of that, of course, now we have a lot of people that are trying to make a lot of money. We have the Russian mafia. We have the oligarchs in Russia. So the idea of making money, that making money is more important than anything else, is relatively common in Russia and in Greece, where the economy, where money wasn't worth anything a number of years ago. Other researchers argue that antisocial punishment can be adaptive in contexts where the rule of law is insufficient. And of course, that's exactly what happened in Russia and Greece because society folded up. There was no rule of law, and that's what happened in Greece and Russia. In the Muslim countries, in Oman and in Saudi Arabia, the royal family was the law. So the rule of law was insufficient. Anything could happen. In dealing with a system that can't always be trusted to function, people come up with alternative ways to ensure that their needs are met. In Brazil, there is a complex sociocultural strategy termed Yatimbo, by which people manipulate or dodge the official rules to achieve things. And of course, now we found out that if the stories are correct, then Donald Trump didn't pay any taxes. He paid $750 the first year he was president of the United States. And some people voted for him because he had billions of dollars and kept saying that he didn't need anything and he didn't need anyone. He was going to pay for his own program that he was trying to get elected, and he was so rich and he was going to fix the economy because he was wealthy and he knew how money worked. And then it turns out that my goodness, I paid a lot more than $750. I paid. Let me think. Boy, how much did I pay? I paid about 50 or 60 times that much uh, in 2016. But a lot of people admired him, and he admitted that he didn't pay taxes for 18 years, and he claimed that well, anybody should not have to pay taxes if they can get away with it. And that's, of course, the same way it is in Brazil. And there are a lot of people that agree with that. And then when he changed the tax code that gave very wealthy people bigger tax breaks, a lot of people were saying that's great. It's wonderful that the billionaires don't have to pay any taxes. That's really good. A real life example of these weaker norms for civic cooperation can be seen in the game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? In the show, which was originally created in England, contestants were able to use a lifeline, and they could poll the studio audience for help in answering a difficult question. Okay, so if you've ever watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, if you don't know the answer, you can always ask the audience. You get to do that one time. Uh, by the time you make it up to $1 million, I can't really remember how the thing worked. I never really watched it. It used to have Regis Philbin in it. Of course, Regis died last year, but this was really popular 5 or 6 years ago. When Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was introduced in Russia, the contestants quickly found out that they couldn't trust the audience. Remember, revenge is big in Russia. Frequently, the audience members would deliberately choose the wrong answer in an apparent effort to mislead the contestants. So, in the United States, of course, and in England, when they asked the audience gave them the right answer. When they asked the audience in Russia, a lot of times they gave them the wrong answer, just to mess the person up. Not unlike the public goods game, many members of the Russian audience seem to be more motivated to sabotage the play of contestants than to help them. As the Brafman brothers in 2009 have said, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russians became suspicious of those who were trying to profit off the hard work of others. Norms of civic cooperation remain relatively low in Russia and many other societies around the world, which makes it more difficult for governments to band citizens together in cooperative ventures. And of course, this is a picture of I apologize for that. This is the name they gave their group, not me. I didn't have anything to do with it. This is a group called Pussy Riot, and they are a feminist and LGBTQ organization. They're run by a, a group of feminist women in Russia, and that's one of the reasons why they refer to themselves the way that they do. Anyway, they are trying to get the women of Russia to band together for social justice, and there are two of them were in jail. Now they're out. This individual is in the United States now. I don't think she's overseas anymore, or she's not in Russia anymore. She has immigrated to the United States. They always wear these balaclavas, and they're very colorful. These are them. This is the World Cup. The last time the World Cup was played in Russia, and of course, this is one of the members of the organization. She went out on the field. She was supposed to be a policeman. She was dressed as a policeman, trying to keep people off the field. Here she ran out on the field to give somebody a high five. And here they are. They did an illegal. They're a band actually, a punk band, and they were giving a free concert. This is in Red Square. They also gave a free concert in a church. The Russian Orthodox Church is in Russia. Anyway, they gave a concert in there, and of course they were arrested for blasphemy and all other kinds of things. Anyway, there they are. You can see it's cold and it's snowy there, and they're all dressed in interesting clothes. But they always wear balaclavas so nobody can identify them. This lady, of course, was arrested and put in jail for hooliganism, as weird as that is. Anyway, that's you can look them up. You can listen to their music. It's really kind of interesting. Of course, they speak in Russian, so you're not going to understand what they're saying. But it's a musical group. And social activists. And that is the end of the chapter. Okay, so, I told you we're going to talk about Russia. The thing about trying to mess people up and who wants to be a millionaire. Evidently, they don't want anybody to be a millionaire, I guess. Anyway, very interesting. Next week, chapter 13. So I'll see you next week. Stay safe, everyone. The surge, there is an autumn surge that's going on. So thank your lucky stars that you're on the reservation where your leaders are trying to keep you safe. Anyway, so I'll see you guys next week. Stay safe. Whoops.